Personal fouls are serious in nature and include either a safety violation or a sportsmanship violation. And so when a personal foul occurs at the 6U level, play will be stopped immediately whether that team has possession of the ball or not. And that moment will be used to explain to the player what he did and most basically be used as a teaching moment. Then that player will have to leave the field and will be replaced by another player. And so at no point in time will a team be man down in the 6U game. If the personal foul occurred on the defensive end of the offended team, the ball will be granted to the offended team at the center X. If the personal foul happened on the offensive end of the offended team, the ball will be placed as close to where the ball was when the foul occurred and close to the sideline. Personal fouls include cross-check, illegal body check, checks involving the head or neck, illegal cross, use of illegal equipment, slashing, tripping, unnecessary roughness, unsportsmanlike conduct, fouling out, and ejection. Each one of these personal fouls is explained in a video following the technical foul video. A cross-check is any time that a player makes contact with another player, whether they have the ball or not, with the space between their hands on the shaft. So right here, you are not allowed to push or hold any player with the middle of your stick. All holds or things of that nature must be with the closed hand on the player. So a couple of discrepancies with this as you'll get into some games. Once you get to higher levels, it seems like a lot of people are allowing cross checks to happen, and they may be, but for the most part, players are trying to direct other players with their fists, which are on the stick, and not the shaft in between their hands. At younger levels, I still recommend that players play defense with their hands like this and not like this, because they will learn how to control and how to use punches with their hand rather than cross checks. Now, you may run into a ref who really wants them to go like this. Just have the kids adapt that way, but just make sure that players are learning in a way where they know that their hand can touch the opponent, but that the stick between them cannot. Illegal body checking can happen in 5 main ways. The first way is if you hit a player who is not in possession of the ball or within 3 yards of a loose ball that is on the ground or in flight. The second way that an illegal body check can occur is if a player body checks another player above the shoulders, below the waist, or from behind. Third, it is an illegal body check if you hit a player who has any part of his body other than his feet on the ground. So if his knee is on the ground, if his hand is on the ground, if any other part of his body is on the ground, you cannot hit that player. The fourth way that illegal body checking can happen is if you hit a defenseless player. And so a defenseless player can be a lot of different things. Here are the 3 main things that they can be. First, if a player is running up the field and is not looking where he's going and you hit him from his blind side, that is an illegal body check. Also, if you hit a player who is bending down to scoop a ball and his head is down, you cannot hit a player whose head is down like that either. Also, if a player is about to catch the ball, say he's catching an over-the-shoulder pass on a clear, and you hit him this way, that is an illegal body check, even if, as he catches the ball and turns towards you, that you hit him then. Pretty much if he has no time to prepare to get hit, that is an illegal body check. And this is one of the rules that's going to be put down really hard because safety is a humongous concern with U.S. Lacrosse this year. The fifth way we can have an illegal body check is an excessive body check, and that is any time that a player ducks his head or his shoulder and hits another player with the intent to put the other player on the ground. Finally, with body checking, it is not considered an illegal body check if one player is going to hit the other and the other player turns his body and makes the player who is going to hit him in the back. If a player has time to react to a player who is going to hit him and he turns his back so that he hits him from behind, that is not an illegal body check. Checks involving the head and neck are absolutely extremely important, especially this year as safety is becoming such a huge concern. So here's what you need to know about checks to the head or neck area. First, no contact is allowed to the head and neck area with the cross or with any of your forearms, hands, shoulders, any of that. But so what will constitute a personal foul is if any follow through is seen. So say you're playing defense and you're riding someone's shoulder and they kind of duck and it comes up into their neck area. You have to pull your stick off and then regain leverage on their hips or on their arm, and you cannot follow through in that area. Now, some refs are going to call you as your stick slides up and hits them in the neck, but the important thing is that there's no intent to injure by actively hitting him. The second way you can get a personal foul with checks to the head or neck is by swinging your stick and slashing them in the head or neck. Now, with this, a lot of times a slash will not be called if the stick just barely touches the helmet of a player. So if there's no real impact, sometimes a ref will call a brush, and that will not be considered a foul. Finally, this is one of the checks to the head or neck area that a lot of people don't think about, but if the player who is in possession of the ball ducks his head to initiate contact with another player, this is usually called spearing. That is absolutely a personal foul as well. I don't believe a lot of refs are going to call a penalty. They'll probably just turn the ball over, even though any type of spearing should be a personal foul. An illegal stick penalty will be called anytime a referee finds that a player's stick does not meet the regulations that it must. For field players, the head of the stick has to be at least 6 inches wide at its widest point, as well as 10 inches tall from the top of the head to the bottom of the sidewall. So this does not include the throat area. Any shooting strings on the head have to be within 4 inches from the top of the head. So from here to here has to be less than 4 inches. Also, any of the strings that hang off of the head have to be at a maximum 2 inches long. For short sticks, the length of the head and shaft combined from end to end has to be between 40 and 42 inches. Defensive sticks have to fall between 52 inches and 72 inches from the top of the head to the bottom of the shaft. An illegal equipment penalty will be called anytime a ref sees that a player is not using equipment that is specifically designed for that purpose, as well as for lacrosse. So gloves have to have their entire palm. They can't have big holes in the palm or in the fingers, which you can also use tape if your gloves are kind of falling apart. And also, another one of the biggest things that this rule applies to is shoulder pads. Some of the older shoulder pads actually don't have bicep pads that will come off, and if you cut the pad in any way and you modify it at all, it is no longer a legal pad. You have to have shoulder pads that have the Velcro on-off bicep pads if you want to take them off. Slashing mostly happens when a player does not hit stick when they are trying to make a stick check. Here are 4 ways that slashes most often happen. First, and a lot of people don't know this about slashing penalties, if at any point in time a player is swinging uncontrollably, it will be called a slash. Whether or not it hits the stick of the other player or doesn't hit them at all or anything else in that. If a player is swinging their stick uncontrollably, 2 hands, 1 hand, it will always be a slash. Next, a slash will be called any time that a player tries to strike another player with their stick and hits anything other than the stick or the gloved hand which is on a stick. So if a player is carrying one-handed, the other player cannot hit this arm. They cannot hit their waist or any other thing. The one time that this is okay, and it will not be called a slash, is if the player who is carrying the ball turns to defend their stick so that they do not get checked. So if a player is trying to throw a check and I turn and their stick hits my arm because I'm trying to protect, that will not be a slash. Now, also with this, anytime a stick hits a player's head, it should be a slash, but if it barely touches the helmet and there's no real impact, oftentimes referees will call that a brush, which is not a slash. Finally, all one-handed checks are considered slashes. Now, there's one big exception to this. If a player is trying to make a two-handed check and one of his hands accidentally slides off, that will not be considered a slash. Tripping is an obstruction on any part of the body below the waist of a player, and this has to be a primary action, where if a player steps in front of another player and trips them, that would be a trip. If they just throw their stick in between their legs, that would be a trip. But the one place that a lot of people think is a trip when it's not is if I'm running down the field and a player tries to check my bottom hand, but they miss my bottom hand and it goes down to hit my leg. That should not be considered a trip, because that player was not intending on messing with my legs. Similarly, if a player is going to scoop a ground ball and another player trips over that stick, that should also not be a trip. Unnecessary roughness can happen in 3 main ways. First is any violent infraction with a push or a hold. So anytime you are extremely violent when you are pushing or holding, that will be an unnecessary roughness call. The next one is anytime that a player is set up to have a pick and he's got his pick set. Defensive players are not allowed to run through that player. They must try to get around that player, and if they do hit him, it will be an unnecessary roughness foul. The final unnecessary roughness foul happens when a player does something that is avoidable and also with violent intent. So anytime a player does something that is violent and could have been avoided and isn't really part of the game, that will be an unnecessary roughness foul. Unsportsmanlike conduct fouls are divided into two categories, releasable and non-releasable. The three releasable unsportsmanlike conduct fouls are: first, if a player continually commits the same technical foul over and over and over again. The second one is if a player is in play and he gets pushed out of bounds or he runs out of bounds, if he does not come back into the field of play as quickly as possible, that can be a releasable unsportsmanlike conduct foul. And finally, the third one is that if a player continually is not subbing the correct way. So if he continually subs by not running through the box, or in a lot of the lower youth divisions does not wholesale sub every player off and every player on, that will be an unsportsmanlike conduct foul. Non-releasable unsportsmanlike conduct fouls include things like taunting, disrespecting another player or teammate, discriminating against somebody for anything like race, color, religion, anything of that nature. This includes things that are body language oriented as well as verbally oriented, and they will not be tolerated by players, coaches, or referees, or even spectators for that matter. The second set of non-releasable unsportsmanlike fouls include everybody in your community. That means parents who are on the sideline, assistant coaches, players who are not actually playing, coaches, players, everybody, anybody in the community can get an unsportsmanlike conduct non-releasable foul if they do these following four things. First is initiating an argument with a referee after a call has been made, or if they are trying to influence the call that a referee is making. Second is using profane or inappropriate gestures or motions or language at any point in time during the game. Third is to bait or call unneeded attention to yourself by showboating, celebrating, anything that the referee feels is unnecessary. And the final unsportsmanlike conduct foul that is non-releasable is any time that you deliberately grab the ball during a game. This is mostly used during a face-off, but sometimes it happens in the actual game. But so you can absolutely never grab the ball with your hand while playing the game of lacrosse. Any player who accumulates 3 personal fouls or 5 minutes of foul time will be fouled out of a game. And so once a player is fouled out, another player from the same team will enter the field after the player who fouled out would have been able to go onto the field had they not fouled out. A player, coach, or anybody that is affiliated with your team can be ejected from a game for 1, trying to strike an opponent or leaving the bench area when an altercation on the field starts, also getting a second non-releasable unsportsmanlike conduct foul, and third, any action that is deemed flagrant misconduct by the officials.